Welcome to this special program. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and in now 75 years since independence, India has seen accelerated development through collaboration between Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, state, civil society, and the private sector. The 91 reforms, where the state provided the stimulus and markets picked up the mandate for GDP growth and brought prosperity to the common man. UPI, where private sector innovators provided digital public goods that the government mainstreamed through policy support and used for the welfare and direct benefit transfers to its citizens. COVID responses is another fine example where the state, civil society, and market forces came together to ensure a timely response to the virus as well as protection of the vulnerable segments of our society. If we are to achieve our sustainable development goals by 2030, the country needs a better orchestrated, more robust mechanism for private-public partnerships. Today, we have three individuals who, through their careers in government, private sector, and civil society institutions, have strived to achieve synergies and unlock the potential of collaboration. Let's meet them, let's talk to them, let's hear from them. Well, first up with us is Dr. Shekhar Bonu, currently serves as a senior fellow with Niti Aayog, has formerly headed Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, which is the DMEO. And before joining Niti Aayog, Dr. Bonu worked with the Asian Development Bank, which is the ADB in Manila, Philippines for 15 years before which he served as a civil servant, including as a district magistrate, as well as a CEO of state-owned enterprises in the government of Rajasthan. So clearly somebody who is replete with experiences and wears a lot of hats. Saru Tumuluri is our next panelist. She has over 20 years of experience, during which she has forged a strategic partnership across government and corporates. She currently heads strategic partnerships and corporate affairs at Navi Technologies. Prior to this, she served as the CEO of Khosla Labs, where she founded Verified Digital, a digital identity, KYC, and digital transformation platform. Last but by no means the least, Sudha Srinivasan leads the Center for Social Innovation at the Nudge Institute, a development action focused on resilient livelihoods for all, working with government, markets, and of course, civil society. A key initiative from her center is the Indian Administrative Fellowship, which brings senior executives from the corporate sector to serve alongside principal secretaries of state departments to promote livelihood opportunities across various sectors. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being on this platform, and let's begin this conversation. Well, Sudhaji, I'd like to start with you first. Well, although we do understand the broad merits of collaboration, why is it crucial for India's exponential and inclusive development? This has been on the agenda of the government as well.
Yeah. So India, by constitution, is a welfare state with a governance model in which the state and government does play an important role in the economic and social well-being of its citizens. But we started with such a poor baseline 75 years ago in terms of human development, public infrastructure, just the maturity of our industry back in that time period, that our development budget for education, health, and what is counting as welfare is among the lowest in the world. The private sector, in the meantime, has stepped up remarkably and offered products and services to India's low-income segment, whether it was HDFC in affordable housing or low-income public schools across the country, or even startups like, say, Meesho or Big Basket that are creating economic opportunities at scale for the youth that are joining the workforce. But where markets and governments have not been able to reach, we've needed civil society organizations to step up, and they have brought in inclusivity in the development narrative. If you look at work in ultra-poverty in tribal India, rural India, urban India, it's largely the non-profits or the NGOs that are taking the benefits of development to the last citizen. For a country like ours, I personally feel that we can only celebrate the rising up in the GDP ranks if it is in tandem with this alleviation of poverty. And I think this ending poverty in our lifetime is a vision we should all share and work towards. For that to happen, all stakeholders, right, Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, like you said, have to join forces. It's not an option.
Right, and obviously you're completely right about that. And Saru, in your understanding, what are the broad challenges or constraints for India today as it stands today, the status quo, if we talk about, and how would a collaborative approach help address that? Because that is something that we can get a lot of collaboration.
No, absolutely. So I think in terms of the challenges or constraints India faces, there are many. But I'd also like to flip this question and say, what are the strengths we have, right? I think as demonstrated by PM Modi in the Jan Dhan, the JAM, every one of us today actually has the strength of the mobile, right? So while the collaborative approach, what I have seen coming from a private sector, unlike Sudha that has come from an impact sector, there's a lot we can collaborate with the understanding that today the mobile is a very, very powerful tool that almost the 1.3 billion Indians in an adult life can vie to have, right? So even the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile, that was a great collaborative approach in the sense of started by the government. And I will, a lot of details around how Aadhaar, or like you mentioned, UPI, was built actually or was designed by a set of volunteers, which is the Samaj, and how that helped the bazaar actually take it and really scale it into many, many solutions. So the entire fintech revolution as we are standing today is actually a good example of a collaborative approach of both the government, the private industry, as well as Samaj, which is the society.
All right. Well said. Absolutely. And Dr. Bono, it's time to rope in your expertise. Help us understand the evolution of the state's role as a primary stakeholder for designing and developing large-scale impact interventions.
Thanks, Vineet. A lot of what you have asked have already indirectly addressed by Sudha and Saru. Basically, all across the world, when we look at the role of governments, according to development economics, is to address the market failures, and which are plenty, and then also make sure of to control some of the negative externalities and so forth. Large part, when we started off 75 years back, we had a large number of illiterate households. We started at a very, very low economic growth. And our human capital also was very low in terms of health and education. And unlike many other countries, we also had a lot of cultural issues that we have to handle, even to this day, the status of women and so forth. So from that very low base, we had to create this upward cycle, virtuous cycle, where we had to create wealth, and that's largely done by markets. And probably in the initial 5 decades, probably we didn't do a great job. We didn't let private sector fully operate to its best. And I think the reforms of 1990 really helped. So that has helped the government to start raising more resources, because we were at a higher economic growth rate. And certainly we have been addressing large parts of the market failures, that is building opportunities, especially for the poorest households from the most marginalized communities and remote areas. We could have done a lot more better, because, as you know, large part of the development process is also about behavioral change. The government can take services to the remote areas, but ultimately the household should be willing to send their children to school, the girl's child to school, and making sure that things like child labor are avoided and so forth. So there are also a lot of things that the communities have to do from their level. So it also means that the community mobilization, awareness of communities are required. So this whole theme that unless until the civil society, the government and private sectors operate in tandem, it's very difficult to address many of the development challenges that we have. And obviously, the state has to play a very, very critical role, because it has to empower and enable and create enabling environment for the private sector, so that the private sector does it creates wealth, it creates jobs, and a large part of the solutions can be also market driven and market solvable. And many of the government can also create opportunities for the markets to come in through regulation. For example, we have wastewater. If government comes with regulations saying that industry has to use treated wastewater, suddenly the wastewater becomes monetizable or marketable, And likewise, the governments, there are large parts where there is need for community mobilization and community awareness, raising community awareness and so forth, for which we need decentralized community-based organizations. We also have the third-tier government, Panchayat Raj, urban local bodies, because many of the problems are very granular, local. So the communities have to come together locally to work on it. So government clearly has a major role to play. But of late, the development challenges, especially given the climate change and many other energy transition that is taking place, we have also accelerated goals that we want to achieve, that is SDGs, and we have also higher aspirations to become a developed country by 2047. To achieve them, we need a different, not business as usual path, where greater collaboration is required between private sector as well as civil society. And on one front, we need more people like Sudha, the Nudge Foundation, and experts like Saru and others to come in, because we are finding a lot of technologies which are rapidly improving and changing every day in private sector. So they have to be brought in, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, to solve routine daily challenges that people in marginalized areas face. So that means we need even more. There's even more need for greater talent movement and contributions between private sector or organizations like the Nudge, which fosters the private sector mid-career talent to come and work with the government.
Right. Right. Well said. So well articulated. And Sudha, you have a very rich experience, more than a decade in the high-tech industry, and you're working towards, furthering social impact, via technology. What do you think is that unique opportunity that professionals from the tech sector can use and contribute to the country's development?
Yeah, just following up on what Dr. Bono just said. While AI and machine learning and emerging technologies are disrupting every aspect of industry, like whether it's food delivery or consumer retail or travel, how you plan your vacation, everything has changed because of how technology-based startups have disrupted these sectors. But when it comes to the development sector, which is solving for basic human needs, this disruption has been slow, right? It often takes decades for technology to become affordable enough and to trickle down and go into spaces where there's no money to be made. But we know that the same technology has the potential to advance human development at a much faster pace. So the magic sauce to make this happen is people, the professionals who will come in and make this their life's work. If socially conscious professionals from the technology sector apply their skills and knowledge to solve for India's poor, we of course can solve for poverty in our lifetime and end poverty in India by the time India turns 100. Our journey in the Center for Social Innovation started with social entrepreneurs. So we brought in tech entrepreneurs who started non-profit startups to solve developmental challenges, whether it was in education or health or affordable housing, to use technology to accelerate the pace at which these problems are solved for India's base of pyramid communities. Mid-career professionals who are not startup founders, but still keen to offer their volunteer hours. We've seen the growth of societal platforms, people like Sharat Sharma, Pramod Verma, Sanjay Purohit, and several others, the countless others that have been part of creating the India stack, have actually brought financial inclusion to the aspiring and the next billion segments, promoted the MSME sector, created platforms like the Open Credit Enablement Network or ONDC, that's actually fast-tracked the pace of India's grassroots development. The Indian Administrative Fellowship, of course, was conceived in the middle of the pandemic, sensing the heightening of social consciousness and the readiness of people at a CXO level, senior leaders who could not join startups, or just were satisfied with volunteering. And for them, we created an opportunity to work with principal secretaries and heads of departments and senior-most civil servants in the state, and be the part of the system that was shaping new policy, spawning new programs, and actually seeing through the implementation of some of those programs. And that has been a really remarkable journey in the state of Karnataka, where we started. We're now, of course, going into Punjab and are looking to go nationwide.
Right. Congratulations on that, Sudhaji. Saru, coming to you now. Let's talk about your experience of building large-scale solutions through your work at Khosla Labs on identity management based on Aadhaar and India Stack. The question is, what do you see for the markets and the pathways for bringing about sustainable social impact? Because that is a huge area which can use this impact.
Absolutely. So I think for social impact, again, drawing on what Sudha was mentioning about Aadhaar and India Stack, I think Aadhaar, again, is a great example. This is probably what we are, probably about 10 years since it started. I think most of us know that Nandan Nilekani was asked to put together a unique identifier for the 1.3 billion Indians, and how he got a bunch of volunteers together who were all obviously technical experts. And as quasi-government fellows, they went on to create this absolute leapfrogged platform called Aadhaar, which now we all have a unique identifier. And also a newly formed regulator called UIDAI was formed, right? So to answer your question, Vineet, so financial inclusion has been a huge beneficiary of Aadhaar, right? And if one were to ask how, the DBTs, the direct benefit transfers, the rations, right? There were tons of middlemen that it would actually pass through before it actually reached the common man. Now, every common man can actually have a bank account. Again, how do they have a bank account? Because government, in its part, enabled the private and the PSU banks to open a bank account for anyone, even without a minimum balance. So now with a bank account, with an Aadhaar in place, the government can actually transfer the direct benefit transfers directly to the bank account of the beneficiary. So great, no leakage around the way. That's a good example. The other big example of how private sector can help is in the financial inclusion. And this is where a lot of startups are playing in a space what we can call is inclusive capitalism, right? Private sectors are able to offer small tenure loans. Your vegetable vendor, the bhajiwala who comes, on the streets of our homes, he basically needs a small tenure loan. He just needs a loan of, let's say, a 5K, and he just needs it for the day. Because all he needs is he needs to get sabji from probably the main market, kind of use that to buy his goods for the day, sell his goods, make whatever profit he can, and then repay the loan. Without Aadhaar, none of this would have been possible because it's not possible for a bank to service these kind of needs. So I think these are great examples of how collaboration of the markets has basically created pathways. We're seeing social impact happen. I agree with Sudha, it is not happening probably at the rate we want it to. But I think staying again in the private sector, I can see how financial inclusion at least while there are many, many areas of, impact, whether it's education or health or many other areas that can be touched, but financial inclusion surely is getting impetus with many of these societal platforms that are being built. And India is a very, very large country, right? And India is very diverse. Sometimes in the startup community, we always think that our apps are only servicing the 50 or 100 million of India, whereas the rest of India, the Bharat, the 1.2 billion sitting out there. But I can also see initiatives by the startup community, initiatives by the bazaar that are happening to make sure some of these also have a social impact. And I think I like the concept of inclusive capitalism, where there is capitalism at play, but it is inclusive for all strata of the society.
All right. Well said. Thank you for that. Dr. Bono, important to understand how you feel, and according to you, some of the challenges or constraints that state leadership, is plagued with today. Is it the lack of capacity? Is it the lack of purpose or intent or exposure? Or do you think it is also something to do with, entertaining innovative solutions?
I don't think it is any of the three. Probably it is even more. India as a country is very, very complex. It is huge. And the level of diversity across the country in multiple ways, it's just unique and complex. And we operate in a very, very rich democratic environment, which brings the political dimensions in an extremely fractious, hyper-competitive democratic system. Clearly, there are lots of aspirations. We want to do 100 things quickly and soon. And this has led to a lot of development economists calling Indian state as premature load bearing, So basically, you're trying to do a lot more in a very, very short time. And then you also have various crises that come in once a while. We also need to hold our elections across the country, multiple elections, which many other countries in our neighborhood don't need to do it. So it all adds up. All these things add up. And Indian state has been doing fantastic job when it comes to disaster management. Look at the rolling out of Aadhaar. Look at our payment system. It's even the advanced countries like US haven't yet done it. So there are areas that we have done outstandingly well. But there are also some areas where we haven't done that well, clearly, And these are areas where we also have cultural dimensions to deal with. So these are all anchored in 2,000, 3,000 years of our history. So when I look at global indices of India's performance, and there are a few areas where India does extremely poor, which are largely related to women. So how we have brought a lot of digital inclusion through technology. I think this is my challenge to Sudha and Saru. How can we use digital technologies to bring gender inclusion? How can we empower women, bring them more into labor force? I'm not saying that the state has a lot more important role to play. But one of the most important transformational force that we have right now, that we have seen over the last 10 years, it's the technology. This is one thing that can change the rules of game. It can totally change the way we think, the way we operate, and take us to a totally different plane. I don't think 20 years back we could have thought about JAM, Trinity, and DBT. It has changed the whole game. All the middlemen are gone. The money directly comes. So this is the type of transformational thing that we want to do. The state is working very hard. Certainly, I think we can do a much better job by creating empowering and enabling environment for private sector to do even better. The state should also bring lot more talent wherever it is available, like the Nudge Foundation. What is Nudge doing? There are mid-career civils, outstandingly brilliant people from tech and fintech and others who want to come and support the state in delivering impact. So we want more of them to come in because digital sciences are extremely complex. They're changing every day. That level of technologically sharp, smart minds don't exist in the government system. Of course, we outsource and try to get things done. But as Saru has mentioned, Nandan Nilekani, we're lucky to have people of that capabilities in India. They're coming to government. They can help government transform and pivot the whole service delivery to a different place. So, but there are definitely challenges that I think the government on its own will not be able to solve. These are challenges which have deep cultural roots, where civil society, the private sector, and the government has to come together to address that. And definitely, one of the most important is improving the status of women, increasing their labor force participation in the economy, and everything around them. And then we have to improve the quality of our education. We haven't done that well on health. So these are areas where I'm sure with passionate people from the state, private sector, and civil society, if they put their minds together, create synergies, we can figure out other type of solutions.
Sure. Sudha, Saru did talk about role models like Nandan Nilekani and his pioneering effort, when it came to scaling up UPI, not only perhaps in our country, but, in other parts of the world as well. Yep. The Indian Administrative Fellowship is inspired by people like him, Dr. Bonu and many others who brought their professional skills to the service of the nation. Can you share, what the program is all about, how you envisioned delivering large-scale system reforms, and how is it doing? How is it panning out? What's the efficacy?
Yeah, so we started with a very simple hypothesis that if talent comes, if a senior executive from the corporate world chooses to apply their skills to the development agenda and is paired with a visionary civil servant, then together they can achieve very differentiated results in transforming public systems. Indian Administrative Fellowship is a program for such CXOs from the private sector who potentially are looking to even transition full-time into the development sector. It's a full-time assignment for 18 months, where they'll work with principal secretaries and heads of departments of various livelihood-oriented departments, such as agriculture, fisheries, skill development, MSME, to strategize and oversee the implementation of large-scale programs of the state government. In this journey, we are supported by Niti Aayog, DMEO team, and the rest of Niti Aayog also have supported with offering trainings and making sure that the fellows develop an appreciation for how national level programs get into the states and how this country comes together to solve a developmental challenge. Several members of civil society, including leaders of organizations working in these spaces, are part of our boot camps and the larger network that we connect these fellows to. And this really helps them to learn fast and then start getting productive very quickly and start to contribute meaningfully to these programs. The inaugural cohort of the Indian Administrative Fellowship kicked off in July 2021. So it's a little bit more than a year now, and the results are already starting to show in a very, very inspiring range. The fellows will graduate in December. 10 fellows who have achieved milestones such as creating a micro-enterprise model for waste workers and ensuring that it's sustainable through convergence with village-level panchayats. Another fellow has helped on enhancing the community's capacity to tackle malnutrition, which, as you know, is a severe developmental problem. A child under the age of 5 can be helped to come out of malnutrition, and beyond that age, it's irreversible. So there's a huge urgency to solve malnutrition in a timely manner. And the fellows' work is immensely valuable in converging the three different technology platforms that were being used, bringing about a certain transparency to the data and actually helping the communities to tackle their problems themselves. Another fellow has helped in increasing the placement rate for skilling programs. The fellow working agriculture has created an innovation cell for market intelligence in agriculture, which has huge potential to increase the income of farmers. Amazing individuals who with 15, 20 plus years of corporate experience have now flexed those muscles and worked on not just important problems, but also solve them at massive scale. The combined work of the 10 fellows is reaching 15 million citizens across the state. It has helped the state machinery to achieve very differentiated results, both because of the innovativeness of the approach, as well as the pace of progress they have been able to set with the help of the heads of departments and entire machinery, including the Department of Planning and the steering committee that is overseeing the program, guided by the Chief Secretary of the state.
Sure.
So this momentum gave us immense conviction to go to more states. We're currently accepting applications for the second cohort in Punjab. Very excited to be working with another very visionary set of bureaucrats that are using the fellowship to fast track the development agenda in the state. We have inbound interest from a few other states as well. So the product market fit for the Indian Administrative Fellowship in terms of all stakeholders sensing the need and willing to put their muscle behind making it successful. It's a great illustration of civil society institutions such as the Nudge partnering with government and with our corporate sponsors. So it's also a CSR funded program. Would not have been possible without our partners. They've come together to achieve milestones in inclusive development.
Very inspiring. In fact, that basically sort of connotates, bringing out the best of the worlds and taking a leaf out of what Sudha said, Saru. Help us understand, in what kind of a scenario would a Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar fruitfully work together and come together? And what would be the fundamental tenets of such a partnership to bring about, systemic reforms in our country, which are very much needed?
I think we all, while growing up, we heard the term of public-private partnerships, right? Where public was the government and private was the bazaar, the private companies. I think Rohini Nilikani's work first introduced me to the concept of Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar, right? Where Samaj is a newer entity. It's the volunteers or the folks from the society who are interested in this partnership. Sarkar is the government, and of course, Bazaar is the market, right? So I think a great example, we've touched on them already. Aadhaar is a great example. UPI is a great example because UPI also for, folks that probably are not aware, there's a whole bunch of volunteers who actually put together the protocols, right? There's a whole bunch of volunteers that went and evangelized UPI among all the banks. Right. So there's a lot of behind the scenes activities that happen with a lot of volunteers that were not necessarily the government. Right. So sometimes all the COVID and the COVID response that happened, the apps that happened very, very, I think, effectively. Again, the IAF, the Nudge Fellowship that Nudge is taking on, great examples of Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. And I think for something like this to work together, obviously there needs to be a basic need, but main thing is the government commitment has to be there because the Sarkar is the big one. The commitment has to be there. The government has to put its resources. They have to anchor, they have to promote it. And if you look at it, every one of the changes we've been seeing at a societal level in part of Digital India, the government has been extremely supportive, whether it's putting a new regulator in place or, coming up with a variant of a regulator like NPCI in case of all the payment innovation we've been seeing, right? Now, of course, Samaj, there needs to be enough volunteerism or perhaps a non-profit inclusion who is ready to put their time and dedication on it, right? And along with this, I mean, we have the Samaj and the Sarkar. We need Bazaar to have enough incentive to take this and scale, right? Some of these incentives, I mean, in a country like ours, especially where we are, we started and we pretty much even now are a welfare state, very, very difficult to expect only the government to be championing it all. So I think the entire Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar model is extremely effective because it's like three pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And when put together and when collaboration, and we've seen enough examples of it, like we went through, and would love to see more examples in the education sector, in the health sector, or like Dr. Bonu said, in the women's welfare sector. A lot of these three coming together, I think there's a lot of potential for magic.
That's a good word that you've used.
Yeah.
Potential for magic, potential to amaze people through innovation and camaraderie and coming together. That's well articulated. And Dr. Bonu, in your opinion, what is the emerging wisdom on the right kind of models for the state to engage with the private sector and the civil society as well? That's a very important question because these models perhaps are going to be the deciding factor for the success for some of these projects.
Yeah, thanks, Vineet. Basically, as Sudha and Sarulka mentioned, the state definitely has to take the lead. I've worked as an Indian Administrative Services officer in Rajasthan between 1987 and 98. Then I was abroad for around 20 years doing my PhD and working with Asian Development Bank. And then I had opportunity to come back and see. A lot of things have changed without any doubt. When in 1990s, the government was largely open to lifelong civil servants. So people join at the junior level and that's it. That was so I come back after 20 years, join Niti Aayog, and I find a totally revolutionary type of institutional setup. We just in DMO, there were just around 20 civil servants, lifetime civil servants, and rest 100 were from lateral entry. They were all people, many of them left private sector to 50% salary cut, and they have come. And I've seen the synergy, the amazing teamwork, the amazing contribution of that small team creating. So one, I'm now very, very clear. I've seen Niti. So what is it? I'm just trying to unbundle this new institutional context. One, be open, get a lot more lateral talent. There are lots of the private sector, the government. There are lots of people who are deeply committed to getting those development outcomes. We are all media. Everyone is, I think, in agreement with seeing India much growing at a faster pace, providing greater services to its citizens and so forth. So there's clear alignment in outcomes. We want our nation to be strong, to have to recapture its importance in global economy and meet aspirations of people. So now we need to create those institutions, and so one is be open, get more lateral talent, and that's one. The second part is partnerships. The partnerships between Niti and we have been working with academia. We have been talking with private sector, many foundations, and these foundations and CSRs and academia. And these are the places where a lot of talent is already hosted. So by partnering with them, you are unlocking the talent that exists across the ecosystem. So the government is, through these new institutions, is trying to tap into the capabilities across the larger ecosystem to solve extremely challenging problems that we all face. On our own, maybe it will take years. with this strength of ecosystem, you can solve. So we need to create transformational institutions to transform our country. So Niti has started it. And I think as part of Niti's new initiative, there's an effort to create similar type of transformational institutions at the state level. Because every state, when we go, they have aspirations. The states are the key drivers of India's economic growth. And so we need to create similar type of institutions, and a lot of places it's happening. And we need a lot more effort, similar to the nudge and many foundations that are working, and which can channel. There are lots of talented, passionate people in private sector who want to come and contribute to the national development, both in India and outside. They want to take salary cut. They want to come back and give back to the society. So we need to facilitate that process through transformational institutions. Once talented, passionate, and deeply committed people come into the government, the government's performance, its ability to deliver results will be much, much more. So I think we are on that path, and there's a lot of effort now to create transformational institutions, and we just need to unlock the synergies, between civil society, private sector, and the government, so that we achieve the aspirations that our people want, and we are all committed. There's no doubt about it. We need to create institutions which can facilitate this unlocking of the synergies, and we are moving to that direction. Today's this news conference is also in that direction, where people from different sectors have come together to discuss.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, sir. And that is a note of positivity that we all want to hear. We've almost run out of time, Sudha. Last question is for you to address and conclude as well. We've had a wonderful conversation so far. Sudha, tell us about, the program's vision of impacting millions of lives across the country. How is it going to be doing that? And how is it basically going to be changing things on the ground as well as the granular level?
From the talent side as well, I hope we continue to attract great talent. Once they get an experience of this nature through an 18-month exposure, I hope downstream of the fellowship, their careers look very different in terms of leveraging both their corporate skills and leadership that they built through a couple of decades of work in the private sector, plus this experience. And together, it's a very powerful, very potent combination of skills and capabilities. And I hope they continue to work in the area of development, lead large institutions in civil society, continuing to deliver change for the betterment of society. So that's our vision for the Indian Administrative Fellowship, but I know that it'll become a shared vision and it'll shape based on the aspirations of our other stakeholders in this journey. The program will take its own course, but hopefully in a direction that fast tracks India's development agenda.
Right, and it is a journey that we all have a stake in. It's a journey which we all have an interest in, and it is a journey which is emboldened with passion. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but a lot to learn, a lot to assimilate, and a lot to share on this wonderful conversation. Sudha Srinivasan, Dr. Shekhar Bonu, and Saru, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking on this much anticipated and much important topic, which is, of course, going to do wonders. And like you said, amaze the nation. Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.